Hello, human beings. I've forgotten how this works. Let's see what happens. Right, towards the end, I'm the penultimate speaker of a really fantastic day. There's a theme, there's like a theme going through the day, which is lovely when you see that. There's a kind of, a very kind of customer-centric message. So this is a mea culpa talk, right? I'm going to talk about transformation. I'm going to talk about how I've been getting it, not wrong, but slightly misguided, if you like, for a long time. And how I had an epiphany a few months ago, and suddenly about the last 12 or 15 years of my career fell into focus, and I was like, oh, you idiot. Where you have that like hiding in plain sight moment. So I'm going to try and share that with you, see how we go. First of all, here's some questions about transformation I get a lot. I suspect anyone here who's in the transformation game, as it were, hears a lot. Anyone who's the, let's call it, victim side of transformation says a lot. And I think they're legit, right? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? How do we measure it? When will we be done? Right? And here are some, I'm going to say, sketchy answers to some of these questions. Again, it was like I had this cringing moment putting this talk together. I've said all these things, right? So let's just get that out of the way. We don't know yet. We're agile. Let's just start, right? Who said that? Yeah. I'm not even going to do hands, right? 3 to 5 years, because they're all 3 to 5 years. By the way, that unit of time is known as a CIO. It'll take about a CIO. It'll never be done. CFOs love that. We'll never be done. Here's the bottomless pit of the Daniel Consulting. Or let's ask the consultants, is another one I like. How much will it cost? See how long will it take? Or how much is your budget? How much have you got? That much and a bit. Or even better, it doesn't matter, it's someone else's budget. There's a central change program, so we're fine. Right, let's get some certification in. Or let's ask the consultants. Right? How can we measure it? Okay? You can't measure intangibles. It's change. It just happens. Something lead time. Right? Happiness surveys. Let's do happiness surveys. There's a little star on here. Surveys, it turns out, are an unbelievably powerful tool. We just massively misuse them. Okay? Let's ask the consultants. Right? When will we be done? Well, I like that. When we just decide. We're agile now. Okay? We're transformed. Yeah. When you run out of money. Right? The next CIO, 3 to 5 years. Or when we get new consultants rolling in. We can't ask them, they left. Right? But these ones have different color shirts. It's fine. So I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking a lot of it is because you can look at the same thing and see very different things. Okay? What I love about this, I imagine most of you have seen this faces and vases visual. The optical psychology of this is fantastic, which is this: everyone knows, you look at it and you see either a pair of faces or a vase. You cannot see both at the same time. Ooh. You can be seeing one and the other and you can flick between them, but your brain cannot process that they are both things at the same time. So transformation's a bit like that, right? So transformation is, and again, mea culpa. Well, it's not really a project. We know it's not a project. It's not a thing that you top and tail and give a project manager to on a budget. Is it a program? Spoiler, that's just a big project. Right? That's just another word for project when you've got more money. Okay? Is it a journey? Oh man, everything is a journey. Mastermind is back on TV, and now they're interviewing the mastermind candidates. How was that for you? We didn't do that in the 80s. They were just terrified. Right? Well, I'd like to tell you about my answering question number 4. And again, is it a never-ending journey? Or the finance people going, So this is my aha. This is my, it's just like, literally came in the middle of a conversation I was having with a CTO of a very large, very well-known telco. And he said something, and I just stopped dead in the middle of a call for about 30 seconds, and he started looking worried, right, is what happened. What if transformation is a product? What if it is a product? If I'm going to defend that statement, I need to say what a product is, right? Who thinks they know what a product is? Everyone's terrified now. 2 hands. Does anyone want to have a go? What would you say a product is?
Something that you can sell multiple times to multiple people.
Something you can sell multiple times to multiple people. But good, go. Go.
Something that meets the customer's needs.
Something that meets the customer's needs. Much closer, but something that solves a problem, similar. So it starts with this chap, TedLevitt. And thank you, by the way, that was a very good answer. Professor Theodore Levitt of Harvard Business School came up with this lovely quote: people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. And then you ask them why they want a 1/4-inch hole, and it's actually because they want to put a screw in the wall. And you ask them why they want to put a screw in the wall, because they want to hang a painting on it. Why do you want to hang a painting on it? Because having art in my working space makes me feel calm. They don't want a 1/4-inch drill, they want to feel calm. Oh. Why do you want to feel calm? Because I work better when I'm calm. Okay, interesting. So literally drilling a hole in a wall, that whole chain of events, we'll call each one of those progress. We'll call each one of those impact, right? Each of those little bits of impact takes you towards the personal goal of being more effective in your work. Yes. Right. By the way, sometimes people do want a 1/4-inch drill, right? Let's say that I want my friends to think that I'm the handyman, right? I'm the guy that can fix stuff. Then I actually want to have some cool-looking tools. And yeah, I can drill that hole for you, and I can also fix this and fix this. So there might be some personal status thing that I have invested in a 1/4-inch drill. So even statements like this don't take at face value. Anyway, so TedLevitt, he's at Harvard Business School, working with a chap called Clay Christensen. Clay Christensen, amazing, amazing management thinker. And he kind of coined this idea of theory of jobs to be done. And he said this. He said, a product is something that you hire. You hire a product to do a job, right? And the job might be that thing that customer wanted, but often it's not. Often we need to unpack that with them. Why is that? Well, so a job is something that helps you make progress towards a desired state. And all of these words mean stuff. Right? They're not just picked out words. Progress means stuff. Desired state means stuff. So what is a desired state? Desired state is observable behavior change. Okay? When people, who here has heard, used, or been on the receiving end of the outcomes over outputs trope in the last, let's say, 24 hours? Right? So, yeah, outcomes over outputs. Can anyone tell me what an outcome is?
Desired state.
Desired state, sort of.
Change.
Say again? Barry? Oh, sorry, lady there. Change of behavior. Yes. Josh Seiden has a brilliant book, and by brilliant I mean small. Right? I'm a massive fan of small books. If you've got one idea, put it in a small book. Don't put it in an 800-page book. It's lovely. It's called Outcomes Over Outputs. And he makes the point again and again and again with loads of wonderful examples. Outcomes are behavior change. And so the contrapositive is also true. Anything that isn't behavior change is necessarily not an outcome. It might be a goal on the way to an outcome. It might be, I like the word impact. So there's various ways in which you make impact on the way to that outcome. The outcome is behavior change. Up to and until you have behavior change, you haven't got there yet. Okay? You can have the world's best product. If no one's behavior is changed off the back of it, it's not a successful product. Okay? And then finally, progress then is movement from your current state towards your desired state. So, there's two elephants in the room now. How do we define desired state, how do we define current state? What are we going to do? He keeps on coming out with these words, right? How do we describe our current state? Here's how we usually describe our current state. Takes a really long time to get anything out. Like that, in that voice. First thing, right, don't have 8-month-olds putting stuff into production. Just generally rule for life, right? But if you do, there's a problem with this statement. And the problem is this statement is, what do you mean by too long? Okay, and how do you know? Right? So we want to avoid qualitative judgments. Instead, what we want is to use quantitative judgments like each release takes 30 plus or minus 12 days. I'm not going to tell you whether that's good or bad. I'm going to tell you that's your reality. I've been working, if you were here the last time we had one of these with human beings, I was giving a talk with Anna Urbaniak, who's sitting here. She is incredible at this. She will go into an organization, find its data. She'll kind of, ferret around in like Jira or Azure DevOps or whatever, and just turn this mess into dashboards. And she holds it up and says, that's you. That's your aging defects. That's your time to value. That's your work in process. I'm not going to judge you. You decide if that's good. And if that's not good, you decide which bits you want to focus on. And it's like, it's wonderful. And so what she is very, very evidence-oriented. So now I want quantitative statements. If I've got quantitative statements, I've got data. So now let's think about our desired state. Let's think about the behaviors that describe our desired state. And again, we can talk to people. We can say, I know it's a bit of a mess right now. Imagine sunlit uplands, right? Imagine this wonderful place. What are people doing? And you start telling me what people are doing. And you say things like, do you know what? We can release to production whenever we want, right? And if I were to say to a bunch of people, is that true in your world? And I get 200 hard no's. That's a big fat no, right? But imagine sometime in the future where generally, by and large, people say, do you know what? Actually, mostly we can. There's still a few kind of edge cases. And on the way there will be we mostly can't, but we're starting to get a few little gaps where we're allowed to do that. They might say things like, our team has all the skills and resources we need to do our work. Is that true now? Maybe, I don't know, right? But as we move towards our target state, that statement becomes more generally true. They might say things like, I feel comfortable saying something I don't know. So I'm saying I don't know something, right? Rather than either being terrified to say I don't know something, or every time someone says they don't know something, someone else laughs at them, okay? They might say something like, I challenge the status quo without fear of reprisal, without fear of bullying, without fear of that eye roll thing, right? With, I'm not going to do that because Kirsten did that in that other meeting, and man, the grief she took just for asking why do we always do this. I'm not going to put myself out there. I'm not that brave. And we might say things like we choose our own tech stack. But not just out of anything. We've got a well-supported portfolio of tools and stuff we can use for different situations. I know that I've got a shelf of things I can pull down from. I also know when I use them, a bunch of other folks in the organization know how to deploy them, secure them, test them, operate them, get my observability, nod back to Honeycomb. All of those things are catered for. If I want to bring in a whole new tech stack, I can, but I've got to justify it, and it's on me to do all of those things. And they might say something like, we make decisions in our team, in our big organization, we make decisions confident that we're consistent with some of the other teams. We don't need to kind of escalate it all the way up to manager. And we don't need to have massive meetings because we've got ways of working. We've got consistent ways of working. And so you then get themes around these statements, like there's a theme of autonomy here, and there's a theme of psychological safety, and there's a theme of alignment. And there'll be a bunch of other themes, right? The important thing is that this is not, I don't have a set of standard statements. Here are some statements that are universally true. It's in your organization for your desired state, next thing on your journey, what do you want to be true? How would you describe success in terms of your target state? The other thing about these statements is that they're not true about our current state. That makes them, in product terms, differentiating. So these are differentiating statements. If I could offer you two organizations, I could say this organization is different from this one because a bunch of things, okay? So guess what? Now we have this, okay? We have a tool. We have a tool for measuring progress. And that tool is a Likert survey. Who's heard of a Likert survey? Okay, who's had Likert surveys inflicted on them? Right, a few more hands. So Likert survey is, it turns out, it's an academically defensible tool. So the idea with the Likert survey is this, is you make a bunch of statements, or you take a bunch of statements, and your survey questions are all the same question. For this statement, would you strongly disagree, neutral, strongly agree with that statement? Okay, and I ask a bunch of people, and I get a bunch of results, and that results give me a histogram of to the extent to which this organization believes this statement is true. Caution, contains science. It is unbelievably easy to get this wrong, okay? So I had the absolute joy of meeting Nicole Forsgren, Dr. Nicole Forsgren, a few years ago. And she, if anyone hasn't come across Accelerate and DevOps Research and Assessment, DORA, she got involved with Puppet, then Puppet Labs' State of DevOps report, which is a survey that would run, very informal survey run across the industry every year. And Puppet Labs, Puppet is like a DevOps tooling company, and they would, they'd publish the results, and this many companies say this and whatever else. And Nicole started working with them, and she just laughed, right? Because she's an academic. And she's like, this isn't a survey. Call this a survey. And said, what's wrong with it? And she said, well, and she just starts driving a truck through it. And selection bias, sampling bias, anchoring bias, loads of things, okay? And so it turns out, when you look at Likert surveys, in fact, when you look at any academically defensible survey, has two superpowers. The first thing is it is reliable, and the second thing it is valid. And I'm aware that I'm speaking well outside of my area of expertise now, and I'm also slightly terrified that Nicole might see this and come for me. So I'm going to qualify this with I'm not an academic. But roughly, reliable means this. If I run this survey a number of times, I will get similar answers. If I don't get similar answers when I run this survey a number of times, I have a random number generator. Okay, so it needs to be reproducible. And I don't know if you've been following along at home, there's a huge amount of controversy at the moment about reproducibility problem in all of the psychological experiments people did in the 60s and 70s when everyone was high, which is brilliant because they did evil things with like monkeys and babies and stuff, and like, we've got loads and loads of psychology out of it, and now everyone's saying, not only was it evil to do mean things to monkeys and babies, but you're wrong. And they're trying to start over again. So the reproducibility problem is, or the repeatability problem, is this robustness thing. So it needs to be robust, and the other thing it needs to be is valid, which is, given that I'm going to get the same answers each time, are they the right answers? Right? So in other words, am I asking the right question? And there's a whole bunch of rigorous work that goes into making a survey both reliable and valid that I don't know how to do, right? But that folks like Nicole does. And she did this to the State of DevOps report, and then from about 2015 onwards, suddenly you had these rigorous surveys. And from that's when she and Jez Humble and Gene Kim munged all this information and created this brilliant causal model. They said, if you DevOps, your business will be more successful. And people were like, you can't just say that. And she did, and it was in a defensible way. So, contains science. I'm going to put a Nicole quote up because I'm such a fan. This was wonderfully, as I was putting this talk together, this just appeared in my Twitter timeline. I'm similarly annoyed when people tell me survey measures are proxies. Right? Oh, but it's a survey, it's a proxy. Folks, all measures are proxies. Oh no, you ruined it for me. Right? Even telemetry. So then she says, it's up to you to make sure they're pretty good. Right? So in other words, if we make sure that our proxies are, and that's the valid part, what she's describing there is validity. So if we can make it reproducible, if we can make the assessment reliable, and we're asking the right questions, then our proxy is a good proxy. Exactly the same as observability. If we are looking at the right noises that the system is making, we can then infer what the system's doing. Okay? Don't just toss them because they're not convenient for you, right? Caution also contains disappointing news. So now we can answer those questions, okay? So we can answer the question, we can say, how long is it going to take? Well, we know how long it's going to take. We can say it's going to take depends on how far off the desired state you are. And we're going to know that because we're going to do some initial work to say where are you and where do you want to be. It may be, and this is why we do these sort of baseline surveys and this establishing a control groups and that kind of thing, it may be when we say, oh, it takes too long to put things into production. When you measure how long it takes, A, it doesn't take as long as you thought, because now you've got data, and B, when you look at the reasons for that, that may be as short as you can go, or it may be short enough. You may be chasing the wrong diminishing return. Okay, so how long will it take depends on where we're starting from, crazy talk, I know, and where we're trying to get to. The thing is, what we never do is articulate those two things well enough to understand what it is we're taking on. And if when we start describing our desired state, it's too unimaginable, then let's think about an intermediate desired state. What would be something that we do think would be tractable? And we can do it the other way around. We can say, how far do we think we could get in a year? Or in 2 years or something. And now, guess what? We're suddenly into Kim's OKRs territory. We're saying, if we're going to invest X, right, how far? Imagine all the stars aligned and everything went incredibly well. Spoiler, it won't. But imagine it did. What would that look like? And so we can start to get something that's at least in the realms of possible. How much is it going to cost? Well, here's the thing. If you're thinking about that from the outset, you're doing it wrong. Okay? If we're thinking about how much is this transformation going to cost, and it isn't transforming us to a more effective, more high-functioning, more whatever it is, or business, right? If that doesn't start paying for itself fairly early on, when was it? When was that inflection point going to happen? Yeah? If we're worried about the money, we've already started by doing the wrong thing. Now, I was testing this talk with some people who I trust, and my old boss from 10 years ago, who's just a brilliant, brilliant CIO, he said, yeah, but what about things like security? What about all the kind of, effectively your insurance policy, right? You don't know what your vehicle breakdown policy is like until you break down. Yeah? How do you determine the value of security? And it turns out those are hard questions, right? There's no pithy, quick answer. They're hard questions. We can trend things. We can look at incidents, we can look at time to respond to incidents, we can look at business impact of incidents, we can look at reputational impact of incidents. Hopefully, right, put it like this, if those incidents are happening frequently enough that you can spot a trend, you're in trouble. Right? So hopefully they don't happen very often anyway, because you're doing things right. But then it becomes a tricky, there's some really interesting corner case conversations. By and large, when we're talking about those behaviors that we want to move towards, we can think about that. So I can deploy to production confidently whenever I like, carries with it safely, carries with it, without legally, right, compliance, carries with it reliably. I'm not going to start crashing stuff. Yeah. So that means a number of other things had to be in place in order for that statement to be generally true. So the good news is it kind of shakes itself out. The bad news is because it's a complex adaptive system, it's really hard to see a direct causal line. That's okay. So how can we measure it? It turns out it's not something lead time, right? You will get something lead time. You will get impacts on the way to the outcome, okay? So if you're going after the outcome, if you're going after the behavior change, then you get all of the impact stuff as a necessary byproduct, right? We are more secure because we have to be more secure in order to release frequently, okay? We have better collaboration between the people who own the runtime infrastructure and the people who write software, maybe to the point where they're the same people, but we have closer collaboration because that's a necessary part of the journey to being able to release on demand. right? So we don't need to stipulate that. We stipulate that, and we get this, yeah? So that's the goal. So how do we do this? Continuous assessment and sampling. Caution contains science, right? If I've got a few thousand people, I can randomly sample those people on a regular basis without getting survey fatigue, which is another bias, right? Amy Edmondson, in her brilliant book, Fearless Organization, looking at psychological safety, her survey in there, you know, there's all kinds of tricks that you do as a psychologist, as a business psychologist, of like inverting the sense of questions. Because if all of them are like, if all the statements of things being better, people just go yes, 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 yes. If you invert the sense of them, like I am scared to speak up in a meeting, right? That means that I have to read this, and then I have to realize that actually, no, I'm going to strongly disagree with that. I used to be scared, I'm not anymore. But so those sorts of tricks, and I'm not an academic, so I don't know them. There are tricks such that you can make those surveys robust. I promise you, unless you are a professional academic in the room right now, you don't know them. And there's another bias where we think we do, because how hard could it be, right? And finally, when will we be done? Well, here's the great thing. When our behavior's changed. We've got that, we've got the curve, we've got the graph, we've got the histogram, we can see, hopefully, we can see the line shifting to the right. If we can't see the line shifting to the right, we've got the wrong product. We can be doing it brilliantly, but it isn't giving us the outcome we want. If we do this thing, it will change behavior, is a hypothesis. The way you test that hypothesis is doing the thing. If you don't see the behavior change, guess what? It didn't work. And I've put a little star on behavior, because again, this is a complex adaptive system. What does that mean? That means that on my way from A to B, where I've been describing my ideal state B, do you know what? The world changes, I change, we change, the art of the possible changes. And so I might decide partway along that actually I want to go to C now, which is a whole other set of behaviors. And there'll be an overlap, there'll be a Venn diagram where some of them are common with B, but there'll be a bunch of different ones. At that point, even if this is the world's best product for getting to B, it's no longer the right product. So now we need to rethink, okay, what do we now need to get to C? And that's where the agility piece comes in, is that we are continually not just reassessing where we are on that curve, it's we're reassessing, is that the right curve? Right? And it's completely legitimate to rerun these kind of behavior workshops from time to time. What do we really think behavior looks like? What do we really think our target organization looks like? I know what we wrote down a year ago or 6 months ago, whatever it is, and we can see that some of that is starting to land, and it's kind of making some of the other stuff redundant. Or it's kind of, we're realizing that that isn't having the pull-through impact on the business that we thought it would. So maybe let's go somewhere else. And all of that is now validated learning coming out of treating transformation as a product. So that's it. Let's go build a transformation. Thank you very much.